Hello everyone, welcome to the Everything Dodgeball podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Leitinger, and today I'm very happy to present to you Katie Morrison from Team Canada. It's been noticed and requested because there weren't any female dodgeball players until now, and so I'm very happy to have you here with me. Katie, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Quite good. I'm really glad we can do this, and I'm really looking forward to this one.
Thank you for having me. What an honor.
So until now, I've only had male players and only people I've been talking to for a long time. Basically, I've been known for a longer time. So I'm really looking forward to this one to get a really fresh perspective and see what people over the pond think about dodgeball.
All right, I'm excited.
All right, perfect. So I would just start with a little bit of a world's recap. So give us a little bit of an introduction. Who is Katie Morrison? Just a little intro, who you are, why you play dodgeball. If anyone wants to get a little bit deeper into that, I recommend the podcast you did with Sergio on the Dodgeball podcast a few years ago. So we're not going to go too deep into that and stay more on dodgeball topics. But give us just a little bit of an overview, who you are, about your career, and then dive right into the World Cup, I'd say.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, as you said, I'm Katie Morrison. This year at the World Cup in Austria, I had the honor of playing on the co-ed squad, the mixed squad, as you call it, which is the both gendered team for Cloth Canada. It was a really neat experience. It was my first time playing co-ed on that level. I play co-ed in rec leagues within my region, but I'd never played it on that competitive. I've always played on the women's squad for Team Canada. Back in 2014, I did play foam for the women's squad under WDBF, and then I switched to cloth and played cloth primarily since then. So it's really interesting to be able to see from playing both foam and cloth, because not a lot of players in Canada do. We don't have any crossover players. If you've registered on the tryouts for a men's squad or women's squad or co-ed, you can't play both. You play one, and that's the team that you play for the rest of the season.
Okay.
So I noticed that at Worlds that there's some countries that a player from their men's squad will run over and play on their mixed squad, and vice versa with the ladies. But that's not the case in Canada. We have quite a large population, and we have quite a large population of dodgeball players. So to grow the sport in the country, they're pretty strict about no crossover players. So if you're playing foam as well, you can't play cloth. So that's a decision that you have to make kind of early in the season. And then that's kind of something that you stick with. I'm really blessed that the region that I play in, I'm going to shout out some local leagues. We play in Play Hamilton, we play in Grimsby Smash, and then I run Dodgeball Niagara, and it's all cloth. So in Hamilton, which is Southern Ontario, it's all cloth local leagues and cloth tournaments and cloth youth leagues, but the rest of Canada is mostly foam. So we have a lot of opportunities where we are to play against each other in cloth for almost a decade now.
Oh, that's quite interesting. So how big would you say is the cloth scene? Like how many players, or just a ballpark, are there in Canada that play mostly cloth?
Well, in Hamilton, there would be almost thousands, because there's 4 different
Okay.
leagues that are all competing, and they play almost every night of the week. And they do both men's and women's in multiple locations. The rest of the country is pretty new to cloth. And it was pretty exciting for me when we were in Europe for the rest of Canada to kind of see how big cloth is on the world stage. So a lot of leagues within the rest of Canada have started implementing cloth. If they've already established a foam league, they're like, let's have a drop-in cloth night and just try it out. So I know Dodgeball
Okay,
Canada has
awesome.
been doing a really wonderful job pushing cloth balls to other local leagues within the rest of the country. There is a couple leagues I know out in Edmonton that are playing cloth, and there's a couple in Vancouver that have started playing cloth. So it's exciting to see it grow within the country. But as of now, it's mostly foam.
Okay, that's really interesting because it's such a big country that you have like certain areas designated to different ball types. I think
Yeah.
someone's playing nose thing as well. So that's like in Europe, basically everyone is playing glove and now starting to implement a little bit of foam. But Canada is basically the whole of Europe, so you have all the different regions. And so, how do you
you said you have to decide really early on. When is it that you have to decide which division you want to play in and which format?
Well, we have combine tryouts in different locations across Canada, and they're for each ball type. So you could try out for the foam, go to the foam tryouts, or you could go to the cloth tryouts, and then you'd get a letter back from the coaches if they want to recruit you into the training program. And then at that point, you have to choose. So if you've chosen to
Okay.
go to both combines, and both coaches say we're interested in you, you have to respond to one and say, I'm picking
Ah,
this.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole program is like split it up into very separate divisions, basically. And
Yes.
is there like some oversight, or is there like a committee or something on top of that, or are they just standalones?
Yeah, so Dodgeball Canada, we have a new president, Cam Booth. He's the captain of our men's squad. So he's the
Yeah.
president of Dodgeball Canada this year, but formerly it was Dwayne, who's the president of WDBF.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was wearing two hats, which becomes a lot after a decade of running the organization and WDBF. So he did pass the baton to Cam, who's now running it. And underneath Cam, there is the two divisions. There's the cloth and foam, but we all report back to Dodgeball Canada.
Okay. Okay. And so when time-wise did you decide to play co-ed or mixed? Co-ed is such a
Uh,
funny word. What
I
does that
know.
mean?
Yeah, we call it co-ed. I'm not sure. That's just what we call it here. But yeah, mixed squad. When we go for the tryouts, the cloth tryouts, everyone tries out at the same time, the combines, and then the coaches for both squads will do a presentation. So the men's squad, which would be irrelevant to me, and then the women's squad coach, his name was Tony this year. So he did a presentation kind of explaining his coaching style, what he's looking for, the commitment that he's going to require from the ladies that he recruits. And then my coach, which was Brian Waring this year, he has an opportunity to make a presentation as well. So during the combine, everyone kind of sits and listens to all three coaches and they present themselves. And they would say, because everyone coaches differently, and Dodgeball Canada do give the coaches kind of free reign to coach how they see fit, to manage the team how they see fit, and they have assistant coaches as well. So they would do a presentation and say, "This is how we would like to present our team. This is how our training schedule looks for the next year leading up to Worlds. Everything from fundraising ideas, stuff like that." And then they would reach out to the players and say, "What did you think of our presentation? We'd like to have you on our squad." And then you choose if you want to be on the women's or the mixed squad.
Okay, and how many women are on the women's squad, or how many players are in each squad in the beginning?
The women's squad, I believe, took about 20, and then
Hmm.
they into the training program, and then it's 2 years, about a year and a half within that program that you go to training camps, and then from there they'll whittle it down. We had a North American competition in Dallas, Texas, where we went. We played against Mexico, Team North America, which was a recruitment team, and then Team USA was there, and then ourselves. And then so from the training camp program, they would pick about 12 players and say, okay, you've been activated, they call it. That's the word they use. You've been
Okay.
activated to be a starter or on the squad to go to the Texas tournament. And then, depending on your performance at that tournament, then we have another 6 months back in training camp where everyone's put back into the program. And then they'll say, okay, about 30 days before you're activated to go to Europe for Worlds.
Just 30 days before the
It
tournament?
will, yes, it's about 60 to 30 days. So you'll have check ins with your coach and you'll kind of know you're going to be activated or you're on the borderline. You need to work on a few things. You check in with the coach constantly to kind of have an idea. But I think they publicly post the list 30 days before to let the rest of the world know who's being activated.
Okay, so when did you book your flight to Austria?
I booked my flight probably May, April, May. Yeah, I
Okay,
booked it. I booked
okay.
it early. I booked it early because I brought my kiddo with me. I don't know if you saw him running around on the sidelines. He was the shagger for Team Canada.
Ah,
So it,
okay.
so he came, and I'm pretty sure he was doing the workouts with Team Austria. He was
Awesome.
trying. Yeah, you saw him on the sidelines in a couple of the videos of him trying to work out with the Team Austria. He's trying to learn. He's 13 now,
That's
so
great.
he hopes to be on Team Canada in the next few years.
Okay, that is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. So it seems like the whole program in Canada is just much more structured and way ahead of anything basically we have in Europe. Because I've been talking to a few different nations now and been talking throughout the last 10 years. So basically, we play dodgeball for around the same amount of time, I think. And I think we have nothing that seems remotely as far as your program is from a structure point, from like a preparedness, and the whole timetable is incredible. So 2 years ahead, I think you have to be much more prepared if your country is that big, and you have to organize much more than for us. It's just, okay, next week we're gonna meet over there and it's half an hour for everyone. So you probably get more structured by necessity, but that sounds, at least from the outside, or at least for my ears, that sounds really professional and awesome. I hope we get there at some point, but also it sounds a little bit difficult for players. So it seems like a lot of investment without any basically insurance or knowledge whether you're gonna play, and even if you will be picked and you have to book your flights basically 30 days or 60 days ahead of a tournament to Europe. That's also
Yeah,
costly if
yeah.
you have to do it. So when we went to Canada, we tried to inform everyone as soon as possible because of the travel and everything. So dodgeball, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in Austria, it's quite an expensive hobby if you do it on the
Yeah.
international stage. So how do you like manage that personal, and how do the other players on the team manage that?
Well, the struggle wasn't necessarily going to Europe, which is crazy that that wasn't even the hardest part. The struggle is getting together to train because, uh, yes, props to Dodgeball Canada. They do have a very good structured program as far as the combines for the tryouts and the recruitment program and all that. It's really structured. The only downside, which isn't even a downside, but it's you never play really with the same people because there's so many people on our squad and you have the option of jumping between the women's squad and the mixed squad. I played with people that I had never played before and people that are on the other side of the country. And for us, it's a 4 hour flight to get to where the
Yeah,
men, like there's people on my team that are 4.5 hours away, and that's a flight. So it's, you don't get to see them, you don't really get to know them. So other than the couple training camps that we've had, you're playing with basically strangers. So you don't necessarily get the camaraderie that we see from programs like Dodgeball Austria and Dodgeball Germany and some of these other teams that are closer together.
yeah, for sure. Okay. And so, because that was really fascinating when I talked to Nate, that they like had one training session before Worlds basically, and they did a lot of film and stuff around that, and obviously parts of the team trained together or played the tournaments together. But like, how many actual sessions as a team did you have in preparation for the World Cup?
Well, we had almost one a month. So that would be about 8 or 9 that we were able to do within that year that we were training. And then in December, we were in Texas. So we had that mini tournament to play together. We also try to break off. And here in Hamilton, there was about, like where I am in the Niagara region, there was about 7 or 8 players that were all in the program that live within an hour drive. So we tried to have mini training sessions with us, like within our group. There was a
Mhm.
handful of players from Ottawa, and they tried to get together. And same with players. If you lived within a vicinity of other players in the program, you tried to reach out to them and say, let's rent a gym, let's practice together, just so you could throw a cloth ball around with people you knew were going to be going to Europe with you. There's
Okay.
an advantage in camaraderie, right? And knowing
Yeah,
playing
sure.
teams that have
Definitely.
played together for years compared to individual talent. And that's a
Yeah.
struggle that Canada has. And that's something that I discussed on the other podcast is that if you have individual talent, but they're all spread out across Canada and they only get together for this one tournament, they will underperform a team that may not be as individually talented, but have played together for decades. They know each
Yeah.
other, they know how to cover each other, they know where you're going to be on the court, and they have they're in sync.
Yeah, for sure. So, do you do a lot of film like the US guys?
Yeah, yeah. We try to do film and we try to post it amongst ourselves. A lot of our training program. Sorry, a lot of our training program as well is we watch footage of other countries. So we
Yeah,
did we did pair up. So one thing I wanted to tell you that was pretty interesting. Our coach implemented this year for the mixed squad. It tended to be a lot of the males on our team were out in BC, like British Columbia, or up in
Yeah.
Ottawa. And then a lot of the female players were from South Ontario. So the coach paired up one female player with one of the male players and kind of had a buddy system. So you spent a month discussing with that person, and you'd have like one-on-one chats where you'd watch footage together. So say I was buddied up with you and we were on the mixed squad together, you and I would get together 1 or 2 times a week and we would watch Dodgeball Austria's games or Team USA's games that are from different competitions, and we would dissect the game together and we would chat about it, and I would get your perspective and you would get mine on what would you do in this situation and what did you think about how this player covered this person, and we would talk about different strategies and how our squad would fit in with a game that we were watching, and that seemed to kind of get the mental aspect of the game. If we couldn't physically be together to practice, we tried to at least be on the same page with strategy and how we mentally meshed.
Okay. And is there like sort of an oversight? Because as you said before, the trainers or the coaches in the beginning give you like a speech on what they want to do, how they see the game, how they want to the trainings and tactics to look like.
Yeah,
So if you're 1 month in a pair of two, I I believe after a month there are gonna be lots of pairs that have very different opinions about the
yeah,
game. Maybe how
yep.
do you get that to pull on one string in the end?
Well, we do try to, when we do get together in person, we try our best to be able to mesh as a team and do a lot of team building, scrimmage games, stuff like that, where we can implement what we've learned. We also had full team chats as often as possible to dissect what's everyone's thoughts and what did everyone think, and watch footage of other games. I found that this year, compared to years in the past, this squad was very statistical based. So they would watch our footage and our games and say, okay, Katie Morrison made this many catches. Katie Morrison counters this way. Or we would watch, for example, you, and they would dissect you as a player and say, he always covers this player. He always tends to hug this side of the court. This player throws left or this player throws right. And we would try to dissect that in different spreadsheets and take more of a mathematical approach. And I don't know if
Okay.
that's the best way or I don't know how that played out, but it was really interesting to try a different tactic going into Worlds. But that's something that the squad this year tried to do.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Can you get me the statistics for me? Did you make them?
Yeah,
That would be interesting
I can
because
ask.
we never. That would be quite interesting. I would be very interested in that because who does those statistics?
The player on my team, his name is Shane Salzberg,
Yeah.
and
Ah, Shane does them.
he loves spreadsheet.
I have
Yeah,
to
he
ask
does all
him.
the spreadsheets.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll have yours.
Okay, that is awesome because he writes me sometimes and we talk a little bit about dodgeball because I went to Vancouver in 2019 and I joined them for a gym session. We just played foam, but Shane and Pete, I think Pete wasn't there this year, but we played a little bit
Yeah,
and
Pete
like
Decker.
have a little ongoing friendship. So shout out to Shane. You gotta give me your statistics
Shout out
on
to
me
Shane.
because
And shout out to Pete. Pete's one of the best players I've seen. He's a fantastic
yeah,
player too.
absolutely. So that is quite interesting because in Europe we have like one statistics guy who is from Sweden, Darko. I don't know if you know him, and
Yeah, I do know him.
he also always does everything with statistics. And sometimes we argue or talk about or discuss it how valuable statistics in dodgeball actually are because it's so individual from situation to situation, and the situations are so complex and different that I personally think
Yeah.
statistics aren't that helpful. Or I wouldn't say statistics aren't helpful, but there are only certain statistics that really help you. Like, for example,
Yes.
analyzing a player and knowing his tendencies and where he moves and when he throws and stuff, that is really important and that can help you. But like knowing shot percentages or stuff like that, I don't think that it helps. But maybe Shane can convince me of something else. But that's quite interesting that you do those statistics because it's also a lot of work. That's why no one does it, I feel like
It is a lot of work. It is one thing that it is good. I agree with you, what you said about whether or not it's valuable. But one thing that is valuable is for newer players that are coming onto the program. Sometimes they'll go to a training camp and they'll be in their own head mentally. And I do believe that dodgeball, especially a lady playing on a co-ed or a mixed squad, there's a lot of confidence that's required. And they would be in their own head and they would be frustrated and say, oh, I had a terrible training session. I just don't think I'm cut out for this. And then you'd look at your stats and say, oh, wait a minute. I actually did have a good accuracy percentage. I had a lot of catch percentage. And then it's a little bit better for your confidence to say, okay, well, wait a minute. Maybe what I think in my head isn't necessarily what's showing on paper.
Yeah, for sure. But
so it did help with some of the confidence.
Okay, but do you do the statistics in training as well?
Yeah.
Awesome.
The coach does.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's okay. We don't do that. I don't think anyone can be bothered at this time, but maybe at some point we get someone to do that. Or I have to import Shane if he likes to do that.
Yes.
That is really great.
He does like to do that.
Okay.
The coach, one of the reasons that he wanted to try a program like that was because a lot of our players were new to playing together.
Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily know, should Katie Morrison be a corner player, should be middle, should be two position, stuff like that. So he would use stats and enter it into a kind of a system to say, these 6 people mesh really well together. And this player's really aggressive, so he meshes really well with this player who's more reserved, and tried to use the stats to make a line that would be the best case scenario.
Okay, that is absolutely amazing. I really have to get them in a room and talk to them, because I wouldn't know where to begin with that. But I think it would be really interesting to see how that works out in reality, because I think in theory it makes a lot of sense, and maybe you can make the perfect algorithm to match up players. But because for us, at least, it's often like sort of, we try to do objective measures and like take a lot of things into account, but in the end it's a very subjective thing, and it's more of a feeling, a gut feeling. Lots comes down to experience. And I think for us that's quite easy, because we're so close knit that everyone knows everyone. But if you don't have that advantage, that is a really good objective way to do it, probably. But did you feel like that it worked out, or how does it feel in reality? Do the stats measure up?
Yes and no. I feel like because we're on almost a time crunch where you're meeting these people for the first time and you're being put together on the squad, and you have less than a year with only a handful of training camps to actually play with them and beside them, to see who meshes really well together, who complements each other, and who doesn't. There wasn't a lot of time to figure out who was the best lineup together. So I think that this was an avenue and an extra tool to kind of make those lineups the best you could. But in theory, my experience is teams that have more camaraderie, that have just played together.
Yeah.
It makes you better players, because if on the stats they say, for example, Katie Morrison has the highest catch percentage for the females, we're going to put her as a middle player with more aggressive male throwers, and that's the statistics, and that's where they've put me. But then I find that I don't develop necessarily as a player, because I'm not put in positions that are not my strengths.
Yeah.
So if I'm always put in something that I'm very good at, and that's my role, but then what happens with those arms, they call them, so stronger offensive players are eliminated from the game, and now I'm all that's left, but that's not my strength, and I'm now forced to be in a role of offensive player when everyone else is gone, when I didn't necessarily even have a chance to throw a ball up to this point, because that wasn't the role you put me in. So that was a struggle that we found when you place players based on their high stats percentage, because as you know, in dodgeball, everyone has to do everything. That's just the reality, is you're going to have to throw, you're going to have to catch. So to say you don't have a high catch percentage, so don't do that. But then what happens when you're last and a catch is all what you need? You need a Hail Mary catch to win the game, but you haven't really trained that, you haven't practiced that, because that's not your confidence level. Then you're kind of in a tough spot, because the team's like, oh, well, this person never catches and we need a catch, so let's just write off this set.
Yeah.
So that's the downside of it.
Okay, but it's very also quite professional. I mean, it's something we definitely don't do at that level. I just have to check my phone, because my mic, because I for some reason hear myself twice. Hello, 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 hello. No, it's fine actually. Just sounded weird. Okay, I'm back. So because it sounds really good in theory, and it sounds like a very advanced tool. I don't know how accurate it can be, but that's something for another time. But as you said, in the end, everyone has to do everything. And that's also something that I wanted to ask you, like, how hard is it to do the whole trial training and stuff in that environment where you have very few options and moments to basically present yourself and like show what you've got and convince the trainers and coaches that they want to pick you, because there is already like a really high pressure in our training session sometimes, even though it's mostly internal and not really from the outside on, because most of our players know quite early on that they will be playing or won't be playing. So like there are those fringe players, but in the end, there's still players put a lot of stress on themselves to perform, and that sometimes leads to players not really using the trainings for what I want them to use it. So basically to get a little bit out of their comfort zone, try new stuff, try stuff that we need as a team, and then they fall back to just doing the same old stuff that they're quite good at, but it limits them. And if you have a trial period like you that is like really long, lots of stuff could change in that time. So in a year, you can learn a new skill basically or improve a lot. But if you are reduced to your stats, or if you really have to shine in those moments, then you're probably going to go back to your basic strength, and it doesn't like incentivize you to try out other stuff. Is that a thing, or is that just me?
No, that's absolutely a thing. That's absolutely a struggle when you're waiting to be activated, when you're waiting to hear if you've made the squad, that there's a pressure at the training camps where you're the first half of the year, the season, you're not even worried about the team dynamic. You're not even coming together as a squad. You're more me against you, because we're both fighting for a spot on the team to Europe. So that is a pressure that you definitely feel at the training camps. Maybe not so much the women in our mixed squad, because we had less females on the mixed squad, but the males of the mixed squad, there was very much an unspoken battle of fighting for a position. For example, if we're at a training camp and I want to practice my catching, I'm lined up and the players will be throwing against me. Well, I'm trying to catch, so give me something that's within range, but they're trying to bump up their stats to show how accurate they are, and they're just throwing as hard as they can, which isn't really helping me. You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
trying to go against each other, and they're trying to bump up their stats and play a lot of solo plays. So, for example, in a full scrimmage, they're trying to bump up their hit kills. So they might not necessarily do what will win the game. They're going to do what gets them the hit kill.
Okay.
And so they can bump up their stats. And for example, if I'm trying to win the game and I'm last, or we have higher numbers, I'm just going to relax for the last couple seconds so we win the game because we have higher numbers. That's what I would do in a competitive game.
Yeah.
But I want to have higher numbers. So now I'm going to do something risky. I'll try for a catch. I'll make a hit that might not go my way, whereas I should have just done nothing to win the 3-minute set. So these are the challenges that we found at the training camp, that you weren't learning game scenarios because you weren't trying to win the overall outcome of the game. You were trying to show what you individually, Katie Morrison, can do as far as stat percentage.
Okay. Wow, that is like a whole new side of coaching and dodgeball topic that I haven't even thought about until now. That's really interesting, because like that is something we don't talk or think about at all. And I'm a coach, and I coach mostly the women, but also our other divisions as well. I do a lot of coaching, and I really always try to make it clear to the players what I want from them in that exercise or in that game, so that they really know what the frame is by which they play. So if we train an exercise and it's about catching, then I want people to throw that people catch it. So basically, if the ball isn't caught, it's the fault of both players. So, but if you do statistics, even then, that's like another dimension, and that's like politics, where you just try to win the stats and not win the game. That is okay. That is interesting. But also,
and to showcase to the coach what you're capable of doing, right? So you want to throw as hard as possible and hit out the player that's trying to make a catch, right?
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it makes you a better player. It makes me, in a game scenario, if I'm playing against you, you're not going to throw me a catchable ball. So I have to get used to being able to catch it.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
I
I
have to be
think
able to get
there is a
used
place
to
for
game
both.
scenarios.
Basically, there's a place for both. Sometimes you just want to practice the skill and then you want to also see the real thing. But especially, I think for us, the structure and the communication in dodgeball is so important. And if players are incentivized to build their own stats, that goes very counter to the way I think about the game. So I don't
Yeah.
ever want a player thinking about their own stats, because that's not what we're here for. We're here for winning as a team. And if I have to do 10 waste shots to win the game, then that's my job. And if it's my job to dodge 10 balls and not catch one, then that's my job. And and I think it's really hard to give it the value it deserves if it's just a stat, because a kill
Right.
is not a kill and a dodge is not a dodge. It always depends on the situation and it can be so different. So yeah, I'll be really interested to talk to Shan about that. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's jump in from that preparation side into the World Cup. Like, how did you prepare for it personally? What did you expect? What were the expectations of Team Canada and how did it play out? What did you think about the World Cup?
I thought it was fantastic. It was really, it was really exciting to see cloth on a level like that. I've played cloth for many years, and I'm very passionate that I prefer cloth. I'm going to be honest. Obviously, I love dodgeball in general, but I have to be careful when I say that. But I do love cloth, and it was really cool to see Canada be humbled, to see Canada play against squads that were superior. I think that's fantastic. It's a learning opportunity for the squad, to the rest of the country, to look and say, okay, we are a top tiered country in foam and have been for many years, but our cloth program is struggling. So maybe let's put some resources towards that and see, what's missing, because the rest of the world is shining in cloth. So that was really exciting for me to see on that scale. I thought the tournament was really well run. I thought the competition was amazing. Yeah, it was really nice to meet everybody and see everything on that scale.
Awesome.
What else? Sorry, you also asked about preparation. Yeah, our coaches required us to do weekly check-ins. So we did have, like I said, the buddy system with a player every few weeks, and that rotated. And part of the buddy system conversations was nutrition and working out, gyms, that all stuff you had to do on your own time. Because, like I said, we are far apart, so it is difficult to get together. So we really did rely on social media and Zoom calls and Google Meets and whatever we could to get together and talk and hash out, like, what kind of protein are you on and stuff like that. Those were our conversations with our team, to give each other pep talks. I mean, I'm not going to eat a cake to myself and then go on to my team chat and be like, this is what I had for dinner, and things like that we were chatting about nutrition and kind of motivating each other.
Okay. Nice. So we try a little bit of that as well in Austria, but also not that professional. We just have a WhatsApp group and all the men post their pictures after they trained to get the other ones motivated. But also that sounds like a lot of work for the coaches. Do the coaches in Team Canada get they paid, or is it all voluntary
No,
work?
No, they don't get paid. It is all voluntary, and the coaches aren't really part of those training when we're paired up. The buddy
Yeah.
systems, the coaches aren't really involved. They just will say, like, Katie and Stefan, you're together for this month, and so it will be on us to reach out. And if I wasn't responding to you, or we weren't communicating, then you would relay that to the coach and say, listen, Katie's kind of dropping the ball. She's not really participating. But it would be you and I getting together and say, okay, we're buddies for the month. What's your diet plan like? What do you think about my workout? And you and I would chat about it. And same with everyone else that's in the buddy system. And then a month later, I would be paired with someone else, and then I'd kind of learn what their regimen is like.
Yeah, but they do have to
But yeah,
do the
the coach
check-ins
isn't really invited.
with everyone.
The coach will check in with everyone, but not as frequently.
Okay.
They just once in a while will say, how's it going? And mostly just on a Facebook group.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so then what were Team Canada's and your personal expectations for the World Cup?
Honestly, it went exactly as I predicted. I thought it would go. I think we finished seventh or eighth in the mixed squad, I believe, which is exactly how I thought we would place. It was really unfortunate that we played Austria twice.
Yeah.
That was devastating news to our team, and we were pretty deflated after we heard that we had to play Austria twice, knowing that you're a powerhouse squad. So that we knew that we would be going into the lower tier pool and not playing for a medal. We just assumed that we would not win when we played Austria the second time. That was kind of the goal, or the reality after we played Austria the first time, and it was very one-sided. But other than that, we placed pretty on par that we thought. We looked at the other countries in our pool and we watched a lot of footage. So we watched footage from ourselves in how we faced with Team USA in Texas, and we watched footage from all the other countries that played each other in the Euros. And we thought, okay, this is a team that we are pretty on par with. This is a team that we can probably handle easily. This is a team that's going to be really tough. This is a team that we probably won't beat. So we kind of knew what we were going into.
Okay. Again, very professional.
I mean, miracles happen though.
Yeah, they do. They do in every sport. I think in dodgeball, it's quite tough to do those miracles, especially if you're really the underdog, because over 40 minutes, it's just really hard to beat someone who is maybe better than you. But still, yeah, miracles do happen. But I think if you don't even believe in the start that there is a possibility, probably it's going to be even tougher. But obviously that was a bit misfortunate that we had to play each other again. I think in the quarterfinals, was it? Or in the in the quarterfinals. Okay.
No,
or in the 16th.
Because you moved Modon and we didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that was like we didn't play you exactly, but we played Team Canada in 2022, so we knew quite a few players of them, and we didn't know what to expect 2 years later. And I didn't know that there was that big of a cloth scene. So what do you think happened between 22 and 24? And is there something you would like to see happen in the next 2 years until the next World Cup, basically?
Well, almost our entire squad from 2022 is different from the mixed squad. Yeah. It was a lot of the ladies had come over from the women's squad to try something different. And a lot of the male players were brand new to cloth and brand new to the competitive scene. There's things that I would like to see differently moving forward for the program. I would like to see more competitive tournaments. I noticed from watching footage that Austria does have a lot of opportunities to play other countries at the Euros and different competitions like that, whereas we can barely get together to play each other, let alone play against another country. So we do have conversations with Team USA a lot and try to get together with them if it's possible to have a little grudge match, a little scrimmage exhibition, but that's really the only opportunity. And I noticed I've played on this competitive level for almost a decade, but most of my squad, it was their first Worlds. It was their first high-level competition tournament. And you could see the nerves. And that makes a big difference. Not even just the mixed squad, but the women's squad, the men's squad, players that had never played on that stage before. You can see that they're not performing as I know that they're capable of performing because the nerves might be getting to them. So it would be nice to have more opportunities to have international competition where it isn't the World Championships, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So how did you try to improve your game, or where do you get your tactics from? So basically in 2022 in Edmonton, it was quite new. Obviously, there was the World Cup in 2018, but I wouldn't say we could take a lot away from that one. And so after 2022, you saw a lot of European nations. You saw the top European nations. What did you guys try to take away from that? And how did the cloth scene in Canada, or the cloth game, did it change because of that? Did you get any inputs from this World Cup? What you want to see specifically implemented or tried out, or something you don't see in your programs?
Well, the program from a political standpoint has changed drastically in Canada. So 2018, we weren't represented by Dodgeball Canada. It was just a group of friends that are like, we love cloth, let's go. And we went to New York City. So there wasn't really tryouts. There wasn't really anything formal. And then moving forward to 2022, that's when we aligned with Dodgeball Canada and we were under WDBF and all the political stuff changed. So we were able to get a lot more backing from the rest of the country to get players from different provinces. So that was a big change that we were able to see, and it's great for the sport. I mean, it's not great for those who are trying out because we went from I'm just going to go play to now I have to compete for a spot. But for the sport and the overall growth, I think it's fantastic. And then compared from 2022 to 2024, even in the last couple months, I've seen so many different foam leagues that are established saying we would love to try cloth. That was incredible to see. What we saw in Europe was incredible. Like, send us some balls. We would love to throw some around. Like, let's start maybe one night a week trying cloth. So it keeps growing, more so now since Europe, which is, again, really exciting to see. Yeah, so that was one of the biggest changes. Mm-hmm. And what else? Sorry, you asked about training. So the training from our squad to this squad, one of the things that we do, our top secret, is we play in squash courts. I don't know if you have like racquetball courts and squash courts where you are. So that's how we train. So one of the best players from the squad in 2022 that you would have played against, you probably remember Ethan Somerville, number 24. He's a really, really strong player, and he was one of the top players from the mixed squad. And he, unfortunately, for personal reasons, wasn't able to try out this year. And it was a huge hit to the team to not have him. But he still was willing to support the team. So every time we had a local practice, he would come out and he would play against us. He would give us pointers, him and his sister as well, Sydney Somerville. They would come out to practices, just powerhouse players, and try to work with us and give us competition to play against somebody. And we play in racquetball courts. So it shrinks the court. We play 3-on-3. So it tried to focus on our reflexes as much as possible to have the ball coming from such a short distance. Yeah. And then when we go to a full-size court, it's like the ball's a little in slow motion. You have a lot more reaction time. You judge the game a lot better. So that's what we try to do for practices, get in squash courts as much as possible.
Okay, but a squash court, at least the ones in Austria, are really small. Like, and they're caged really in small by glass. So basically there is no space at all. Okay. So you get thrown at from like, how many meters is that? Or
5-10 feet, maybe.
Really?
And we only put 3 people in there. So you play 3-on-3.
Yeah.
And we use 3 balls.
Okay.
So you
I have to
a little
watch
bit
that.
of space to move.
That sounds completely crazy to me.
When one person gets eliminated, it's actually better because you have more space. Yeah. When it's 2-on-2, then you have a little bit more space to move around. But yeah, it's great practice.
Okay, you have to send me a video on that.
Because there's nowhere to go. You have to. Okay.
That I can't even imagine it, how that will work in a squash court to play 3-on-3. I mean, we've played a lot of squash or a little bit of squash in the past, and I really like squash, but 2 players meet a lot in that cage. And so 3 players, I don't even know how to start there. With how many balls do you play?
3 balls.
Okay. Do catches ever happen?
All the time. That's that you want to, because you don't have anywhere to move. You can't really dodge.
So you catch a ball thrown from 5 to 10 feet.
Well, we try to.
Okay. Okay, that just sounds like broken fingers to me. But okay. We'll have to give it a try. That sounds awesome. And really, really
you don't
want
to play rubber in there.
Okay, yeah.
Really dangerous, yeah.
Okay, and you play with the normal cloth balls, not with foam balls.
Yeah. No. The foam balls tend to get wrecked there because you throw against the wall and the glass, and then they rip.
Okay.
So we try not to bring foam balls in. We go through them too quickly.
Okay. Really interesting. I'm learning a lot today. That is quite awesome. Lots of new perspectives. Have to see if we implement some of them. Okay. So World Cup, you said you tried to switch it up, and that's why you decided to play for the mixed team. You played for the women's team in 2022. What's your takeaway, and also on the recreational side and at the national stage, playing the women's division or the co-ed division? What's preferable to you, and how do you see the roles different?
Well, they're definitely different. They're definitely different, especially for the lady players. it was a challenge, but it was exciting. I want to push myself as an athlete and as a player, and I wanted to have that experience to be able to play both and learn and grow. It's faster, it's more competitive, and in the mixed. And I found too that my role was very different. So on the women's squad, every individual lady has the same role. That's my experience. So you had to really push yourself to develop. You have to be able to throw really well. You have to be able to catch really well. You have to be able to dodge really well. Anyone's possible at taking that opening rush. Whereas when I was trying out for the mixed squad, it was a lot more, this is your role and this is how we're going to develop that one specific role as much as possible. And of course, you have to be able to do everything as a dodgeball player, but it was a lot more focus on being a support player. And I'm not going to be able to throw a ball as hard as some of the men on my squad. That's just reality, and no amount of training between now and August, I'm going to be able to throw the ball harder. That's just fact, and that's my situation. So let's not focus on that. Let's focus on dodging and catching and how can I support and what role. And it was interesting to try and see how to split the team between which three ladies worked the best together with which three males worked the best together. It wasn't just a straight six ladies. So it was different, but it was exciting too. It was nice to see how the men train, which is different than how the ladies train. Some of them had played with the men's only squad, so it was interesting to get their perspective as well, moving together to a mixed squad.
Okay. And you said like the communication is also that your role is quite specific and different. What is the perspective of the Canadian coach basically? What is he telling you? What is your role in the mixed game?
Well, to be honest, I mean, the coach was great. He did work with everybody on the team, but we did try to watch a lot of footage and mirror what we thought the other mixed squads were doing. So when we would watch Dodgeball Austria and your mixed squad, and we tried to watch other Northern Ireland squad and in England squad, and we tried to watch what they were doing. And often when it was a full six people on, the women would hang back and the men would be offensive at the beginning of the game. Once in a while, a lady would pick up a ball and would be in there, but it was majority one lady with two guys or three guys taking the offensive throw, especially when it was a full court, which tended to be the ladies were left last because the men were taking more of an offensive role earlier in the game. They were also eliminated because they were putting themselves in risky situations. So they would be up there trying to make catches, making hits, things like that. And then the women were more hanging back, dodging, supporting, trying to make shadow catches. And then if the men were eliminated, now it's crunch time. There's only a minute or less left in the game, and you've got the ladies left. So they have to pull everything together and try to win this set after the offensive players are all eliminated. So that was something that we watched on a lot of the footage and something that we had to dissect and say, okay, how can we work with this? Are we aiming for the ladies first and seeing to throw off their dynamic and see how that will work and see if we can change things up for the team that we're playing against? Or should we have our ladies take more of the beginning throws to try and confuse the other team when they're like, why are all the men players hanging back? And we just tried to change it up a little bit and see if that worked for us.
Okay.
And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I think I saw that a few times that you went up with women players when the men were still in, and I thought it was quite interesting. I don't know how well that worked for you. Personally, we sometimes do it like in an opening rush if one of our male players is doing the rush for the middle ball, and we would try to do a fast attack in the opening rush, then one of our female players has the third ball. But otherwise, we almost never do it unless we're like trying to rest someone or try to rotate or just try to see out the game. And sometimes in very specific situation, if we really want to try to trade a male player for a female player, we might try to do that. But in the end, I think, at least in Europe, pretty much everyone has evolved to playing basically the male, as you said, as aggressive player. What did you say?
Aggressive, yeah, the
offensive players. Okay, yeah, I have never heard that term before, but that's quite interesting. So having them as offensive players and the women as more of a defensive position, but also, like you said, the dodging, the catching, that is really important. But when you start in a game and you play mixed versus women's and you play on position 2 or 3, somewhere in the middle, like what's the difference for you personally?
When I play on women's, I'm almost always a corner player.
Okay.
I'm one of the faster ladies. I always take the opening rush, and I'm a corner player because I have a lot of experience. So I'm also not a great blocker, and I have a quick release with a sidearm. So I tend to be the one that throws the most, and then gather the ball back and try for a drop catch, tends to be my strength. So that's more what I would go for on the ladies squad. I'd be a corner player and I would take majority of the throws and then try for a counter catch. On the mixed squad, that's all eliminated. I'm more a background player and I try for shadow catches as much as possible. And I don't run that often, unless I'm running for a second ball, and then it's more to toss back to a player that is going to be taking the throw.
Okay. And on the recreational side, do you play mixed as well?
I do. I try to as much as possible.
Okay.
And our rec teams, because I do play competitive, they are the team that I'm on. I'm really blessed. They think nobody should have a role. Everyone plays every position, and they're really great at, like, you have the ball in your hand, you go throw. Like, we don't pass it off or anything like that. Not in our local league.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to get better.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, fair enough. So we do that in training as well, and like in leagues sometimes as well, to get also the women, to get them into competition against male players, which makes the women a lot better and faster as well, because the game, as you said, is just a little bit faster. But yeah, in the end, when it gets really competitive, the roles are quite clear cut sometimes, but it's always like sort of a balance you have to keep between that there are different roles, but that all of those are equally important. And you have just a different job as a male or a female player, the same as you have in a separate division if you're a middle player or a wing player or a corner player. So how is that for you personally? Because you play as a winger in the women's squad and then you come into the mixed squad and play in the middle. Like, what do you prefer? How do you feel about that? And what do you like about it? And what don't you like?
One of I like both. I think that it's really important for every player to be well-rounded. I think that what makes you a good dodgeball player is if you happen to be able to play every position. Because what happens when there is a male player as a winger that gets eliminated, and now I have to be in that role, right? That you just have to push to that spot, and now I have to be there, and there's no sense being um, not having the confidence to be able to take on that role if that's where you happen to find yourself. The other thing too, I noticed too, playing on mixed is, say we only have two of the male players left, and three go up to the line. I've got a ball, and happen to find myself on the wing, and then we've got a male player in the middle and a male player on the opposite wing. I noticed that when we were playing against a lot of the European teams, they wouldn't even look at me. They were so confident that I wouldn't be called to throw as the female with a ball in my hand that I could have just put the ball on the ground. No one would have even noticed. And that the players were often shifting their body language to face the male players, knowing that they were going to be taking the offensive throw anyway, and I would just be standing there. So that was something that I kind of picked up on, and I noticed watching footage as well, and when we scrimmaged and when we practiced. So we did discuss that as a team, that we tried to mix it up, that if it was if I threw or if I trailed one of the offensive throwers, a lot of the times the males that we were playing against wouldn't even see my ball coming because they just accepted that the woman probably wouldn't be taking that throw.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because I think it's always in dodgeball about balancing stuff out and being as unpredictable as possible. And that's something we saw from like you guys, the US guys, also the Australian players. Like, as you said, in Europe, mostly if one man player is out, then the woman plays from the middle and not from the wing. And I wouldn't say she doesn't throw as often, because if a woman plays in my lineup, we often let the woman throw and use the male presence or the power of the throw just to get the opponents to react or look at them, and so that the female player can hit them easier. So I think the female throw is really a big weapon in that situation. As I said, many players disregard it or underestimate the throw, and if it comes accurate and it doesn't come that much slower, then it's often much more of a weapon even. But on the wing, we haven't tried that out, I think, unless it's for recreational plays, because it's very hard to like put enough pressure on opponents in the mixed game. And then the middle player is quite open. At least that's my experience. So I think it's interesting to mix it up and put your opponent into different spots where he has to react and keeping him guessing. So I think that's quite interesting and maybe something to look at. So the same thing you did. I don't know if you guys did that as well, keeping the last ball in the middle sometimes and not on the wing, because the US did that.
Yeah. The US do that. So that is what you do in foam.
Yeah.
That is a very foam always keeps the last ball in the middle. And half of our squad, a lot of the male players on our squad had a foam background, and this was their first time playing competitive cloth. So when it was a majority of them on the court, they just did it out of natural reaction.
Okay.
And then some of us that have a little bit more cloth background would be like, no, put it in the corner. But at that point, especially at that level at Worlds, do what you're comfortable with. Like, we're not going to change your game style or what your natural instinct is. So if you feel comfortable with the ball in the middle, or if that lineup felt comfortable with the ball in the middle, just let it go at that point. Like, there's no point in changing it, right?
Okay, yeah, fair
and
enough.
it also, yeah, it very much depended on who was on the squad, who was on that lineup, and what the score of the game was. So if we're just trying to stay alive, then we would put it on a wing, because we're trying to, bring down the clock and try to stay alive, keep everyone just stay alive, move side to side, don't do anything risky. If we're trying to push the clock, then maybe we'll put it in the middle, because we're trying to draw more balls so we can be more aggressive going back and forth, right?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's also quite interesting. And you said the male players, lots of them had a foam background, but you said there are actually quite a lot of people playing cloth in Canada. Why weren't there more cloth specialized male player? Is the foam pool just that much bigger that the male players that play foam are still better than most of the cloth only players?
I wouldn't say better.
No.
The foam pool is definitely much larger in Canada. So the cloth pool in Canada is almost exclusively from Southern Ontario. We've played cloth forever, and that's the only place in Canada that's played cloth. So the foam players specifically Shane and the guys from Vancouver, they had all played only foam, and they only have an opportunity to play foam where they are, and they tried cloth for the first time only a couple of years ago. So their background is in foam, and they've tried. To answer your question, a lot of the highest performing men that have more experience in cloth were on the men's squad, and we don't jump the players. So if you tried out for the men's squad, for example, like Dan Long, Jake Lowe, they've played since New York City. They've played for a long time, and Cam Booth, and they just love the mixed men's squad, prefer the men's squad, and as long as they keep being activated on the men's squad, they'll stay there.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because we thought like we didn't know what to expect against any of your teams, and when we played you in the opening game, it was we won that game quite handily. Don't know how to say it. Yeah, we won it. And then afterwards we played your team, I think 2 days later or something like that, and we didn't know what to expect, and we didn't know that they were completely separate teams. So we were kind of surprised and caught by surprise in the beginning, because it seemed like the male players on that team had a little bit more of a cloth dodgeball experience, and also the men's and the mixed game has a different pace. So it caught us quite by surprise, and it took us a while to handle that game, and it wasn't as professionally handled by us than the first game, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and that's something many European nations also are looking into. And as you said, especially if the community grows and you have more players and you need players and want to give players the opportunity to play as well, so that you start looking into separate lineups, and it has also some certain advantages, because you can really concentrate on one part of the game, and the mixed and the women's or men's game is quite different, and it's probably the most difficult game where you need the most chemistry in between the players, because it makes a lot of difference in the mixed game. And to combine that and make one unit out of those 6 players is a real tough task. And if you have player coming from the women's game and from the men's game and joining them like an hour later to play mixed, it's often a bit of a struggle for people. So until now, we've decided it still gives us the biggest advantage because we haven't got those big communities, and still our top players, there is still a little bit of a drop off between certain players. So it makes sense for us from a competitive standpoint. But I think in the end, in a few years, I don't think that many teams will play both divisions with the same players anymore. But that's just what I think, because also in the foam, there is also not really crossovers, right? Like in the foam teams, there are also 3 separate teams.
For Canada, oh yeah.
Yeah.
3 separate teams, and you can't play foam and cloth.
Yeah.
We have 6 completely different squads with 6 completely different coaches, programs, everything is completely different, all 6.
Okay, yeah, that's quite a huge program. I'm kind of a little envious of that. So you said you also play a little bit of foam, but you prefer cloth. You said that loud and clear.
Yeah.
I just want to state that.
Oh no.
But
yes, I do. I'm not going to get invited to any more foam tournaments because of that. No, I do, and that is known. I do love cloth. I started with cloth, and tried out for foam back in 2014 when we were sending a team to Hong Kong. And like I said, it's actually a funny story. When in Hamilton, in the Niagara region, it's only cloth. All of our tournaments are cloth, all of our leagues, which is pretty substantial. I think we have 5 or 6 different leagues that are all running cloth every night of the week. And someone told me there was a dodgeball tryout in Toronto for Team Canada. So I went to this tryout, and it was a foam ball because I didn't realize that the rest of Canada was playing foam. So I'm like, what is this? Why are people throwing this ball around? What are these rules?
and
what
you've never played it before.
So I tried it. I had never played it before, so I tried out, and I was blessed, and I made the team. So I had a lot to learn from foam perspective before we went to Hong Kong, but it was really cool. And then from there, we were able to bring foam into our region and try to convince players from outside of our little island that cloth is an option, and in my opinion better, but an option. And so we tried to become friends with, I mean, dodgeball players are dodgeball players. If you play one, it does translate. And I found that too, because I've played rubber, I've played no sting, and the skills are the skills. You understand countering, you understand covering each other, pop-ups, you understand dodging side to side. The way you throw might be slightly different, holding onto a foam ball versus cloth, and the rules are different. You might have to play a little bit faster, a little bit more strategic. But a dodgeball player that's talented in one is going to be talented in the other. That's my opinion anyway. So that's how I tried to grow the sport and say, listen, it doesn't matter what ball you like. What matters is we're all trying to grow the sport of dodgeball, regardless of what program you're underneath, what political affiliations, if you're WDA, WDBF, it doesn't matter. What matters is we get more people, more kids, more youth trying dodgeball for the first time and understanding that it isn't just a schoolyard game, that it is competitive dodgeball.
For sure. Yeah. So I've seen you at the World Cup, and you have like a sort of hook throw. I don't know what it's called in English. So
the sidearm?
A sidearm. Okay. Yeah. So you have like a sidearm throw, and that's been quite popular in the past, also in Europe, especially when the cloth balls were bigger, when they were like 8.5 and not 7
Right.
inches or what it is. So especially for a lot of female players back then used the sidearm, and some of them still do, but it's not as popular, especially in Austria, where we have a lot of handball background. So most of the female players know the usual handball throw, and there are no sports in Austria that I know of that are popular where you use that sidearm. But do you throw sidearm in foam as well?
No,
Okay.
I throw overhand, like a baseball in foam, and I don't throw sidearm at all in foam, but in cloth, I can do both. I can either throw overhand, windmill, or sidearm in cloth, and it depends on what I'm trying to do. So my sidearm, because I came from the 8.5 background, we started with the bigger balls as well.
Okay.
So that's the throw that I have the most experience with, so it is the most accurate. So if I'm called to throw solo, or I'm throwing, the entire other team is lined up against the back line and it's a high chance of being caught, then I want to throw something that's the most accurate with the most power. So I'll use my sidearm at that point. And also because I find when I throw sidearm, I'm a lot lighter on my feet, because the way I plant, if somebody counters me while I'm mid sidearm, it's easy for me to just kind of hop over it or get out of the way. Whereas when I throw overhand and cloth, because ladies' hands are a little bit smaller, I need to be able to find a good grip, and to get that power, I really have to plant a foot. So my left foot, because I throw right arm, when I plant with my left foot throwing overhand, it's very easy to counter me from that side.
Mm-hmm.
And when I go against high level players, they're going to read that really quickly, that I've planted, and I'm not going to get out of the way. I'm not going to be able to drop catch. For me to get that throw off, most of the time it was a trade. If I was lucky, it was a trade. If I missed, then I'm just out, and that's pointless, right? So it depends what I'm doing. The overhand has a quicker release. Underhand, if I windmill it, it's very accurate, but it's catchable because it's coming low and straight. So I need to make sure that I use that with a person that's not paying attention. So it depends on the scenario, and I think that the more tools that you have and the more styles of throw for the ladies, like you said, it's good to be unpredictable. The male players that I'm facing off against tend to read me the same way that they would stereotype all the ladies that they've ever played with or against. So if I can throw out a different style or something different that they're not used to, then that will give me the competitive advantage. If I'm going against a guy who is probably faster, who can probably throw harder, I need to come up with a different strategy to be able to win this exchange. And the best way to do it is to be unpredictable.
Yeah, that is quite crazy and great. I mean, you have 3 completely different throwing styles. How does your shoulder, is it good for your shoulder that you basically have different styles and like rest some sorts of your body for every other throw? Or is it even tougher to get your shoulder to throw sidearm and then overhand and then a windmill? Or is it just used to all of them by now?
So all 3 use different muscles. So that's the other reason I'll change it up, is if I'm tired. So when I throw sidearm, it's all my back, and I throw with my core. So I kind of just do like a pendulum.
Yeah.
So I don't use my shoulder at all. So if my shoulder is getting really fatigued and my overhand is coming out slower or more catchable, that's when I'll switch it, because it's a different muscle. And same with foam. If I use my shoulder for foam. And if I play a foam game and then immediately play cloth, I'll only throw sidearm and cloth, because I don't want to hurt my shoulder.
Yeah, because I think switching from foam to cloth is really tough on the shoulder. So when I throw foam balls, and I've been trying it out now for a little bit, just because I saw all those foam players at Worlds doing the most incredible catches, and I thought like the speed and like the hard trackability of the foam ball gives you just more skill at catching, because your hand-eye coordination just has to be better. So I start every training now with a little bit of foam throwing and trying to catch that ball, which is incredibly hard and just frustrating. But also the shoulder, I throw the foam ball more from the elbow, I think, than the cloth ball. So at the first few trainings, I could only do like 20 minutes of throwing. Otherwise, my shoulder was completely done for the day. And especially if you switch from the foam ball to a cloth ball, afterwards it feels like you're throwing a stone, and you feel like you get no velocity behind it and no acceleration. So like the switching of those 2 sort of forms of dodgeball is really tough on your body as well. So it's quite a unique style you have to prepare your body for, even though it's both throwing balls at people basically. So I think it's really awesome that you have different throws for each of those categories. Some people I've seen throw one with left and one with the right arm, which is also crazy. So I think there are some nuances and some different ways to get certain advantages and be unpredictable. And the more weapons you have in your arsenal, the better it is. So the sidearm is something I haven't ever tried out, because it's a completely foreign movement for me, coming from a handball background. So it's more of a handball baseball style. I feel like the foam ball, I throw it more like a baseball or like a tennis ball, and the cloth ball, because you grip it different, you throw more like a handball. But the sidearm has always been quite a mystery to me. And some people like you can utilize it really well, and it comes like at a different angle because it comes from lower and it goes straighter, and like the release point is also not as easy to see in which angle you release it. If you release it at the person in front of you or you cross it over, it's really tough to see when you release the ball. So it's just a very unique thing to play against. So I think that's really quite awesome and something to look into as well, to get more weapons into the
Thanks.
arsenal. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So from a personal perspective, what do you like about cloth that where you think it's way superior to foam, as you put it before? I'm just putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, to be honest. I like the rules. I do like the rules. I find my frustrations with foam, not necessarily the ball. The ball, yes, just because that's what I grew up with and that's what I'm comfortable with. But the rule set, I like the 3 minute time clock. I like that if I'm a really good dodger, the game could just last forever. And there's been games that I've played in nationals in foam where it was a one-on-one and my team was up in the score clock overall, and they just said, Katie, stay alive. I'm like, okay. So I had my two balls. They would throw at me and I would just move to the side. I'd move to the, and it was like 6.5 minutes of
Yeah.
me just getting out of the way. And that's fine. That's a strategy. But to me, that's not, I want to use the word exciting, but I don't want to like offend anyone. I just mean that it's really hard to grow the sport. It's really hard to have those really intense flight kill moments that is going to make the sport in the Olympics, that's going to get the sport on the TV, that kind of stuff. You need that high pressure time clock of desperation that cloth gets. There's only a minute left. How many bodies do we have? Quick count them. How many bodies do they have? Quick count them. Now we need to go or we need to backtrack. Like, you need to have those spur of the moment decisions that not necessarily foam feels, because they do have unlimited time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that's also basically my biggest thing that I don't like about foam. And we've tried it a few times now, and we've tried it with set time. And I think with set time, it's quite a fun game. And the no blocking, I personally really like that. So I think putting some time limitations on it would fix a lot of things, at least. But that's probably just the bias coming from cloth and knowing what the time pressure creates for the game, and that it's like for cloth without time would be the worst sport in the world, basically, at least, especially from a viewer's perspective, because it's probably in the women's game, and especially not at the highest level, it's possible to survive for 5 or 6 minutes. I think if you play against Malaysia or US or Canada, it's probably not that easy anymore because they curve the balls around you and you're still gonna die at some point. But still, especially at the recreational level, I feel time limitations have to be made. Is there something else? Like you mentioned the ball. I think that's a lot of what you're used to, and especially in the US and Canada probably as well, there are lots of people coming from a baseball background where the foam ball behaves much more, or is much more closer to a baseball throw, even though the ball reacts quite differently. What
Yeah.
background do you have, or how do you start cloth in America, in Canada, or in the US if you don't come from a
Well, that's the
baseball?
other thing. Yeah, that's the other thing too that I found cloth versus foam is that cloth, the balls are easier to get. They're easier to order, they're easier to ship. So I was able to give them out to people, to sell them, to be able to put business logos on as an image. You can't really do any of that kind of stuff with foam, which again makes it harder to grow the sport. So that was another reason when we would bring foam balls into our training facility. If you throw that ball against the wall at a velocity that some of these men can throw, they're going to be ruined after a couple sessions, and they've got a cut in them, or the foam inside of them starts to change shape and it looks a little bit more like an egg compared to a full
Yeah,
solid dodgeball. And you can't have a sport like that. You can't have, like, in the NBA, the basketball doesn't change shape halfway through the game depending on how hard people are throwing it against the wall or against a player. It stays the same shape the whole game, right? And I find that cloth, the ball stays the same shape the whole game. That's really important change.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't be able to squeeze the air out and manipulate the shape of the ball as part of the sport.
Yeah. 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 I feel like there is a lot, at least from my perspective, and I haven't had a lot of foam balls in my hands, but the ones I had, there is a lot of inconsistency between them. Some of them fly to the left when I throw them, some of them fly to the right, and some fly into the floor. And if you get a good ball, it behaves really well, and then you get the next ball and it just does something completely different. And the moment it has a rip, it just dies on you basically. So just the waste is probably much higher, and it's maybe like in a sport like badminton where you have to just switch balls after a few rallies because they're just done for. So that's
Right.
definitely a part. But I think like the other side to that coin is that foam balls are much easier to grip and don't hurt that much if you throw them at people. So probably the accessibility
Mm-hmm.
and like introducing new players and people to the sport with a foam ball can be much easier. So like the entry level might be much easier, especially for women. If you have a cloth ball and it's pumped up quite nicely, then it's quite hard and it's tough to grab if you're not used to it. So have you any
Yeah.
experience with that, running both leagues or playing in both leagues?
Yeah. Yes, and I have to be careful that I don't offend anyone. But when I used to run youth leagues, we would always start the kids with foam, and then once they got about 12, 13 years old and they were able to grip a cloth ball or willing to try, we would transition them into cloth, and then they would play cloth with the teenagers and then the adults.
Yeah.
So I had to be careful how I worded that promotion, though. I don't want them to think foam's for children
Okay,
and
fair
cloth are
enough.
for the big boys,
You're gonna
but
get a
that's
lot
not
of
the
bad
case. That's
comments
not the
after
case.
this one.
I know. I'm so sorry. I do love dodgeball and I love
Yeah.
both styles. And I honestly, I do. It was more that I was able to get more kids interested in the game.
Yeah.
If I was able to bring out a cloth ball for children, they couldn't throw it and they get frustrated pretty quickly. And we saw that, and then that's not fun. And kids don't want to do things that aren't fun. They want to actually feel the ball, be able to throw the ball, and see it hit their friend. That's what
Yeah,
brings
for
them
sure.
back every time. And what matters is that we keep growing the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's always just a little bit of fun, and dodgeball foam versus cloth and no sting or whatever debate is always fun and gets people interested. I personally don't really care. I'm obviously coming from a cloth perspective, but I think if I would have started in foam, I would be the same about foam. So I think dodgeball is always awesome, and if you like throwing balls at people, every ball will do at some point. But I think there are just differences, and I don't know if one's better
Yeah.
or worse than the other. They're just preferences. And like you said, for young players with small hands, foam balls are often quite superior. And also, I think the injury risk is also lower with the small balls. So we have smaller cloth balls as well, which are like, I think 5.5 or 6 inches. I don't know how big they are, which we've tried, but our youngest players start from like 10 on, I think, and they start with the normal cloth balls, and it's quite interesting that they can actually hold them. I don't know how, and some of them use different techniques, but they can hold them quite well. So I feel like often it's more of a practice thing that you get used to the ball as well, because we've all seen people with big hands gripping the ball for the first time, or foam players gripping the ball for the first time, and like, I can't hold that, and after a few sets your fingers sort of get used to it and you can hold that ball. So
Absolutely.
I think it's also a learning curve, but I think there's a place for both of them. I honestly haven't played the rubber balls a lot. We've played them in the past, or we started with them, and they're quite fun and bouncy, but also like just seem prone to injuries. So I think cloth balls are dangerous enough for fingers. I don't know what your experience is with that, but like the fingers, everyone in Dodgeball Austria that has broken or dislocated, or capsules that have ripped, is endless. So I don't think there's any finger on my hand that hasn't had some damage by a ball. But I think that's just a risk you have to take with the sport of dodgeball. And with foam, it's a bit better, but not mitigated completely, as far as I know. So in the beginning, when we had them for the first time, we were like, okay, you can't hurt anyone with this ball. And we had it just like a little practice session. And I think after 10 minutes, the first finger was broken. And we were like, oh, okay, you can actually hurt someone with that. So it doesn't mitigate it completely. But from that rant, I would like to switch over to a sort of conversation that has started maybe because of my conversations of that podcast in Europe and throughout some nations now. And we have some surveys going on, and I talked about it with a lot of people. And until now, it's always been men talking about from a male perspective. So it would be quite interesting to get your perspective on it, and which is headshots in dodgeball. I don't know if you have listened to any of the podcasts or have listened to that debate at all, but just from your perspective, what do you think about the rule in the cloth game currently? And what do you think of headshots coming from a female perspective in a mixed dodgeball game?
That's an interesting topic. It is something that is debated quite often. My perspective depends on the caliber of the competition. If this is world championships, then it's world championships. You throw the ball to eliminate the players. This is the highest level. I think that everything should be allowed. Also, there's a sportsmanship part of that as well. If somebody's caught at the line and you have the option of not throwing them directly in the face but still eliminating the players, please do that. But obviously it happens. It happens unintentionally. There's opportunities at every professional sport to be unsportsmanlike and win the game, and then there's also opportunities to just win the game. So I think that's something that players who have the ball in their hand need to make that split-second decision, and that's part of dodgeball. Is that if you're caught at the line and I'm caught at the line, and you know that there's anywhere else on my body that you can hit me and there's less than 1% chance that I'm going to catch it, then you're going to not aim directly at my face. That would be more of a sportsmanship decision. But if I'm at the back line and it's a ricochet ball, or I'm caught behind somebody, or it slipped out or something, I'm still eliminated. You got hit in the face. It's part of your body. And also the players are always in a defensive stance. They're side to side. They're moving. That's what I think. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think especially at Worlds, they should be allowed, and it should be more of a sportsmanship respect. I wouldn't hit a guy in the face any more than I would expect a guy to aim for my face. But if it happens, it happens. You're still eliminated.
Okay. I love that answer. That would finish the debate for me, basically. So I would say we are on the same page here. Is that like a controversial standpoint in your community, or like in Dodgeball Canada or the US? Do you feel like that is a particular controversial stance you have, or is that the way most people feel about it, especially women's playing in mixed?
I think, I can't speak for everyone, but I think that is generally the conversation. In our local league, headshots don't count if you're standing straight up and they'll eliminate you, but they're trying to say in A division, because we have rankings of different divisions, in the top tier division, then headshots count because you've chosen to play in that tier division, and to also not scare away the rec players. If I'm just coming for just a fun night out after work and I don't take dodgeball too seriously, I don't want to get hit in the face. I'm just here, with my significant other, just throwing balls around because I don't really care. I'm just here for a fun night out. Then, yeah, you should eliminate headshots, and that's something that our local league has done. But if you're there, like we're there 3 or 4 nights a week, we've got our knee pads on, we're there with our Dodgeball Austria jerseys on, like we're taking this seriously, then headshots count. Just be respectful. That's all.
Yeah, I think that sums it up quite nicely. I would just frame what you just said and just take it as basically the rule for dodgeball, because I think that's exactly right. But it's good to hear it from the other side, because I'm biased to my opinion, obviously, and the Austrian women are coached by me for a lot of years now. So basically, I don't know what is my opinion, what is their opinion, how I rubbed off on them. And I also integrate headshots into my strategy, basically. So I think sportsmanship behavior is a really important point that you spoke to. So I think, obviously, if you have the option to not blast someone in the head, obviously aim somewhere else. But also, if you respect the opponent, you're playing for world championships, European championships, or national championships. So if you play it competitively, then you need to get every advantage you can get. And the head is a part of the body, and it's a crucial part to sometimes aim for. And I think if you don't do it out of malicious intent, the word is something I often use in the last over the last podcasts, is like, if you obviously want to hurt someone, that's unsportsmanship like behavior, and that's something which is, in my opinion, up to the ref's discretion to stop that. And apart from that, I think it shouldn't be in the ref's decision, and headshots should be allowed in dodgeball. And I think, I don't know about your personal experience about that. Did you like see or experience any injuries coming from headshots in your 10 years of playing dodgeball?
Only, yes, of
Yeah.
course. Like, you get hit in the head all the time. That's part of dodgeball. The only time that it actually bothered me, that I had an issue, was one time when we were playing in a mixed game and the score wasn't even close.
Yeah.
And that point, I think that you should make a valid effort not to hit anybody in the head, because there was no coming back from in either direction. Like, if my team that I'm playing against is up 20, 30 points, there's no way that you hitting me in the head is going to win this game for you guys.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something and that's, I think, something to take into consideration as well. If the game's on the line, this is championship game, world championships, and the score is close, it's a nail biter, then take every advantage you can get. You have to eliminate the player. The player's an adult. They've chosen to be on the court. Male, female, doesn't matter what gender they've chosen to be. They're on the court, and they're fair game. Your job is to eliminate that body. But that's also, again, a sportsmanship thing. When Austria played Canada in that opening ceremonies game, and if you hit somebody in the face, that would have been embarrassing for them. The score was not coming back. You know what I mean? That's a sportsmanship thing at that point.
Yep, for sure. I would 100% subscribe to that description. I love that. I think I don't think it's a very controversial thing, especially at the competitive level. I think, as you said, on recreational level, on the youth side, there are lots of situations where it absolutely makes sense to prohibit headshots and just try to keep players as safe as possible, because it doesn't get you anywhere to put them at risk in any way if they just want to have some fun. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also a part where different ball types have their absolute part, and you have to consider that as well. So I think it's awesome that you have that many options in the sport of dodgeball. It has also its limitations and its bad sides, that if you talk about dodgeball and you don't know which division we're in, and if you talk about rubber or cloth or foam, that it's something completely different, and it's like beach volleyball and volleyball inside, and which is quite funny. Like, a friend of mine has relatives in Canada, and they were there after the World Cup, just randomly. They have nothing to do with dodgeball, but they watched us play, and they were like, oh, there was just the World Championships in Austria, and Austria won. And they were like, no, Canada won. And they were like, both. And both didn't have a lot of knowledge of the sport. And they were like at an impasse where they're like, I know that Austria won, and they know that Canada won at the World Championships, but they didn't even know that there were different ball types, and that both of those statements were true, which is kind of funny, but also like represents a thing that in the public eye, it's quite hard to present one front of dodgeball if you have lots of different divisions. So basically, when even the players in the sport can't come to an agreement or just be as tolerant of all the ball types involved and say everything is dodgeball or nothing is dodgeball, then it sometimes becomes quite hard to be one sport in the public, and growing the sport is something everyone is quite interested in, I hope. So I think from that perspective, it's quite necessary basically to agree that all parts of dodgeball are good, and there are just different parts, and it's awesome that we have that variation and we can improve each single variation, but I don't think we have to get rid of one or the other, and just have fun throwing balls at people in different ways and styles.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think, Katie, that's quite a good point to end it on. Unless you have
Okay.
something else you want to talk about, do you have any topic or questions or something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I would love to get your opinion actually on a debate that we have
Yeah,
here
for sure.
quite often. In the cloth game scenario, what are your thoughts on changing the scoring so you have some advantage if you eliminate all the players?
I'm all
Like
for that.
we were discussing that you get, 2 points if you eliminate all the players, 1 point if you have more players on at the end of the 3 minutes, and you get 0 points if you, or 3, 2, 1, or however it's tiered. But it's a point more valuable if you've actually taken the time to eliminate all the players. As fast as cloth is, there is still an element of I'm just going to hide behind this ball, or hide behind a player or something for the last couple seconds to win this game, that we could say, you know what, you actually could come back with a 3 point shot by saying, let's just eliminate all of them as fast as possible, and we might be able to close that gap.
Absolutely. So I'm completely for that. I've been talking about this the last podcast as well, because we saw at Worlds that there were the situations where cloth can be very tactical in the end. And I think at this point, that's a good direction. But from a spectator's point of view, it can be a little bit boring in the end if one team is much better than the other one. And so I think from that point of view, and also from a pure excitement point of view, it's important to keep the game interesting until the end. And I think there are more ways to do that than just that. And I think it's also a matter of tactics that we have to evolve beyond that step. And we are currently working a little bit on that, because I think we are now on the top. So our tactics basically prove themselves, but our tactics were really structured to that way that you can't make a comeback against us. That was basically our most important point in training up to this World Championships. And I think we perfected it quite well. But nations that didn't, that aren't used to that kind of structured organization and without any loose trends, who just want to throw a ball away, feel quite frustrated because there is nothing they can do against that at this point. And I think there is a lot you can do against that. And I think in 2 years, it's going to be a new discussion, because if some teams try to play it, quote, boring in the end, there is lots of room for you to bring action back into that game. But I think it's also a good thing, and maybe just a fun variation of the game to give you an extra point and extra incentive to hit out every player. I think it's good in the glove game that it's not the main focus to hit out everyone. I know in foam it's a quite different perspective and players don't understand that, but I think it gives it much more tactical depth to have that option. But I think playing exciting and aggressive and keeping your pedal to the floor is something that is fun to everyone playing and watching. So I think giving an extra point for that is absolutely a good idea. And it's something I've been testing out in a few recreational meets we did. And also we tried to incorporate a little bit of no blocking into sets where there's a draw after 3 minutes, which was also quite interesting and fun. I don't know if it changes anything by now, because we didn't get too deep into it, and by now it was just drop catching all the time. But I think there are still some possibilities and some things to learn from the foam rules that we could make the sport even more entertaining. So I'm for it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Sorry, I just got to get my phone charger because my phone's going to die in a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the reasons that it made me think about this. Not only did our team discuss it a couple times, but there was a scenario where it's a 3-on-1, and say I'm the last player and I'm losing the game, and the coach is saying step off the court so we can reset with a full 6 players. But me being on the court and staying alive would actually stop the other team from getting a full point.
Yeah.
So it's valuable for me just to not walk off the court. And I don't, from a sportsmanship perspective, I don't particularly like that strategy of telling a player to step off. I get why the coach told me to, but at the same time, I feel like there's always an opportunity for like a Hail Mary. But if you were to change the scoring situation, then staying alive and surviving as that one or two, and it tends to be the females in a mixed game
Yeah.
that are just staying alive. And it's like, well, you guys are just not going to throw at me. And at least if I have some advantage of standing here, then I've earned something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've
And
earned you not getting 2 full points.
Yeah, it's called dodgeball, so dodging should be a valuable thing. So if you get 1 point for surviving, that's awesome. And if you get 1 point for eliminating everyone, then that's great as well. So I think it's a good change. I think it's something that at least until now, most people agreed with me about. So I don't know, is that something like many people are against it in your team?
No, actually, our squad talked about it, and they did say that it would be exciting to be able to close a gap. And if we're down, obviously not our game against Austria at the opening ceremonies, but there was a couple games where we were down by only a handful of points, and to know that if we just went as hard as we could and eliminate all their players, that gap would close pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like in basketball, taking in those 3-point shots. It's risky, but you can close the gap and make a huge difference with one shot.
Absolutely. So I'm team extra point on that one.
Extra point. All right. Yeah, and the other thing too, I wanted to tell you too that to make your rec, if you're bringing a new program out, one of the things that we do here in our region, is that in one of our local leagues, a hit brings a player back in, not just a catch.
Okay.
So we have a really interesting rule that our local Play Hamilton came up with, and it makes the game so fun and so exciting, and it's brought so many females into the mixed game because it forces you to be both offensive and defense. So say I'm last and I'm not the best catcher in the world, I could have a power arm. If I eliminate one of their players, I now gain a player. And it goes, if you're off the court, you're on the court. You're off the court, you're on the court. You're only in jail. You barely get a chance to get water before you're back on the court again. So it makes it really, really exciting. And it's how they were able to grow the league as big as they were with rec.
Okay, so they're playing a whole
too.
league like that.
All the leagues play like that. Yeah.
Really? That is crazy and amazing.
Until you go up to different divisions.
Yeah.
The top divisions, they call it world rules. So we can train for like practice strategy, playing proper rules for world championships. So they do have like A division and world rule tournaments, but all of our rec leagues all play where a hit and a catch brings a player in.
But it's still 3 minutes. A set.
No, it's until you've eliminated the whole team.
Okay, so basically one set can take like 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes, yeah. But it's what's really interesting with doing it that way for the lower divisions or the new people in the rec, like we play it in the lower divisions, that style. And what's really interesting is it forces you to do things you wouldn't normally do. You can be a little bit more liberal with trying catches or crazy dodges or something that's fun, because if you get eliminated, you're just going to be right back in 3 seconds anyway.
That's
like,
really
like,
nice.
oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then my teammate will make a hit or a catch. It doesn't matter. And I'm right back on the court again.
Okay, I will
so
try
it really
that
pushes
next
your
training.
Skills.
Okay, we'll try that next training session, because my first instinct is like, okay, the game is going to go on forever, but it doesn't, because you can only have 6 players. So you don't get endless players if you hit people. But as you said, you can go for really risky plays in the end, because if you hit someone else is going to come in. So you can have basically a leap of faith train coming at you. So that is quite interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, I will get back to you how that worked out, because that is something we've had a lot of games like where if you get hit out, you just run one court length and get back into the game. And when you get hit out the second time, you run 2 and stuff like that to keep players in the game and get them also really exhausted. So that is also one thing we like to do. And like there are games where super catches count that everyone in your team comes back or something like that. So I think that's a really great variation to get more people to play more time when they go play dodgeball. Because in the beginning, that's all you want to do. You just want to be on the field and throw balls. So if that is something that makes that easier, I'm all for it. We'll try that out, definitely.
Yeah, what works really well with that, so the strategy of having them run if they got out, it's still a negative connotation
Yeah.
to, I don't want to get out because I don't really want to run laps, so I'm not trying to do anything crazy. I'm still trying to stay alive.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas with a hit and a catch bring someone in, I tend to lean more on being a catcher. So if I'm last, I'm looking for a catch. But if a hit also brings someone in and there's not a ball that's catchable, then I'm going to be more offensive. And it forces players to are more that tend to lean on catching to bring a player in, to be like, you know what, I'm going to take a throw. I'm going to try and hit someone out because I can also bring someone in. And it's really developed the ladies' ability to throw and be more confident with throws because they could gain a player just by that as well.
That is awesome. I will definitely try that next training session. And I think it's also something for our youth players, like for the younger players who just don't want to sit on the sidelines and wait for 2 seconds. So that is definitely something we're going to try.
Yeah, and for all your listeners, it's a really fun game.
Yeah, it
Hit
sounds
and
really
a catch
fun.
brings it in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll try that. Okay. Do you have any other questions or topics you want to cover?
I think we covered pretty much everything dodgeball related. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and to chat. It is really an honor to be the first lady dodgeball player on your podcast. So thank you.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. I hope you had a good time and I hope people are going to enjoy this one. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And with that, keep throwing those balls, try not to get caught, and take care, everyone.